want to chat to me and the other staff here who are helping put on the webinar, you can change it to all panelists. But so just want to take a moment to ask the participants who are joining us, where are you from? And you can type that right into the chat box. Yay, New York. Rhode Island. Are you from Rhode Island? Awesome. Yes, and we are also live on Facebook. So I want to say hello to all of our Facebook Live viewers. Thank you for joining us today. All right, well, let's get started. So the YES Alumni Grants program is funded by the U.S. Department of State, the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and the grants program is administered by us here at American Councils. And the goal of the grants program is to assist YES alumni to contribute to the social, economic, and civic development of their countries, and to inspire alumni initiatives for designing your own projects in your own countries in order to make a positive change which reflects the ideals of the YES program. So I would like to encourage you as we go through this webinar, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put the questions in the chat box, or if you're watching from Facebook Live, you can do those as Facebook comments, and we will answer your questions at the end. So there are two types of grants that alumni can apply for. One is an individual grant of up to $250, and these would be for small-scale projects or funds for personal development, such as attending a conference or travel to a conference or to some other seminar or workshop that would help you as an alum. And we want you to be very ready to share your experience if you apply for an individual grant. So if you apply for a grant to attend a workshop, for example, be sure to tell us in your application how you plan to use what you learn in the workshop to share out knowledge to your community. Group projects can be funded up to $3,000. These projects should fit the goals of the YES program. So some of those goals might include mutual understanding, leadership development, volunteerism, diversity, or sharing your culture or American culture as you learned it on the YES program. Not everyone on your team for a group project has to be a YES alum, but the alumnus must be the grant applicant, and they must be the project administrator, lead, or co-lead on the project. And we prefer projects with more than one alum if possible. It just makes your application a little bit stronger if your team includes some other alumni. But again, it's not required. And one last note is that projects must take place in a country where the YES program is administered. But the alumnus who applies for the grant doesn't necessarily have to live there now. We do have cases where an alum is studying in another country that is not a YES country, and they want to do a project in their home country while they're home over the summer. That is perfectly acceptable. The projects must be administered in a YES country. So just a small overview. Usually we fund about 20 projects per year. And And the alumnus who applies for the grant is the grantee, and they are responsible for all reporting and accounting. Obviously, you know, if we are granting you a sum of money, we expect you to be very, very responsible with the funds, have receipts for all your purchases, or at least a very clear explanation if no receipt is available. And you do have a final report that you need to write, which serves also as your website story so that we can tell the rest of the alumni community about your amazing project. So some possible themes that alumni conduct projects around, as you can see, are education and job skills, topics related to the environment, health. Community service is also big, and oftentimes community service is tied into some of these other projects as well. Interfaith dialogue and conflict resolution, entrepreneurship, women's and girls' empowerment, inclusion of persons with disabilities, and English language. So if you're attending this webinar, perhaps you already have a project idea in mind. So let's poll our participants right now. What kind of project are you interested in conducting? And I'll give everyone just a moment to answer. Okay, well, I think we've given everyone an opportunity to answer the poll here. So thank you very much for your responses. And finally, before we move on, if you all want some examples of some really great, inspiring projects, please do visit our website and check out the article linked to here about the 2016-17 alumni projects. So do we want to get a little review of our poll results? Iron Team, would you be able to pop that back up? Awesome. So from participants who answered our poll, 25% are interested in doing something related to the environment. Another 25% are interested in interfaith dialogue and conflict resolution, and 50% in women's and girls' empowerment. I like all of that. Sounds brilliant. So I can't wait to see your project applications. All right. So I just want to give you all an example, and that's really fitting that 50% of our participants say they're interested in women's and girls empowerment projects, because I just wanted to share one amazing project with you all called 3.5 Billion Reasons. This project was conducted by a huge team of alumni led by our wonderful alum Mustaseen in Bangladesh. Mustaseen and his team brought young women from rural and urban areas in Bangladesh for a peer-to-peer training. The aim of this workshop was to promote women's and girls' empowerment and address issues like childhood, marriage, and harassment of women in their communities. So for the first part of the workshop, these girls came together to attend trainings and workshops and learn about leadership and fighting against some of these issues that women face in Bangladesh. And in the second part of the project, the mentees took what they learned and implemented projects in their own communities. And this is just one of the many stories that you can read about if you visit the website and the article that we just linked to moments ago. All right, so who can apply for Alumni Grant? All YES and YES Abroad alumni who successfully participated in the YES program may apply for an Alumni Grant. When do you apply? Well, applications open this Friday, December 15th, and they close on February 15th, 2018. So you have 2 months to work on your project and get all your things together. But a really strong application takes a little while to develop. So I do encourage you to begin working on your application as early as possible. We do ask you for things like letters of support, or if you want to have a really strong application, for example, and you intend to use the expertise of someone, for example, we want you to get their resume and submit it to us also. So there are lots of additional documents that come along with applying for a grant. So please do start your application early, or at least read over the application early and understand what's going to be asked of you and how much time you expect to need to put into it. How do you apply? We have 2 ways that you can apply. You can go online through our ACE system, which our colleagues at IRON have just put the link into the chat box so that you can click on it now. We prefer that you do the online application if you're able to, but if for some reason you don't have the internet connectivity to do an online application, that is perfectly fine. You can also go to this same link and you can download a Word application from ACE, and then you can email me, which I will provide the email address at the end of the PowerPoint, and it's also on the application, but you can email me your Word application. Whoops. Okay. So just to give you an overview of the timeline, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the grant application is due on February 15th. We review these applications. There's a 3-round process of reviewing these applications, and so we would notify you by early summer 2018. So that's usually around June, whether or not your application is tentatively approved. And the reason I say tentatively approved is because very often once we select your project for funding, we decide that your project will be funded based on you making certain changes to the project. So sometimes there are revisions that need to be done. So often midsummer, July, August, we spend some time working with you to revise your project as needed. Funds will be transferred to you after you revise your project and accept the grant and send us your bank information. Throughout your project, we expect ongoing reports. So for example, if your project is a one-time event, you're not going to be providing constant progress reports. But if your project is something that's going to take 9 months from the time you start to the time your project is finished, we expect at least quarterly updates from you. When we send you the grant funds, we send 80% up front, and the remaining 20% is sent after all of your finance information has been received. So once you account for all the 80% of grant funds that you've spent, we send you the final 20%. And we also expect you to complete your project reporting as well. Or if your project needs the final 20% to be completely finished, we would expect an interim report and then a final report once the project is completely done. Note that we do require receipts, and you will need to translate those receipts into English. Not the entire receipt, but you would write on the receipt the purpose of the expense, the date, and the amount in US dollars. And we also expect every grant winner to write an article for YES Programs and the YES Abroad website, as well as, and I should note this, that's not on the slide here, but we also expect alumni who are conducting grant projects to be posting on social media about their project throughout the project, and using appropriate hashtags like #YesAlumni. We want you to share what you're doing with the alumni community and inspire others, give them some project ideas based on what you're doing. So all projects and funds must be completed and funds spent by September 30th, 2019. Okay. So what do we look at when we're choosing grant projects to decide who gets awarded the funds? We look at your objectives, like how is your project going to contribute to your community? The constituency, which means who is going to benefit from your project, or who is your target population who you will bring about something good for. How feasible is your project? And have you thought about how you'll evaluate your results? And just to take a little step deeper into these are the questions that you need to ask yourself as you're going through and applying for the grant. So your project needs to contribute to the social, economic, or civic development of your home country, or it needs to contribute to your personal or professional development. And you need to explain in your application how you are going to achieve these things. Constituency. Do the people you intend to serve have a need for what you intend to do? Does your project benefit people from different ethnic, religious, social, professional, and age groups? And make sure that your audience, you don't want to use words like illiterate, you don't want to use words like ignorant. Rather, you want to use words like illiterate. You don't want to use words like poor. Rather, you use words like underprivileged. We want to make sure that you are showing respect to those that you intend to serve. Feasibility. Have you really well thought out the finances of your project? Have you done your homework and actually gone out there to stores, for example, and priced the items that you intend to buy? Does your project include cost sharing? Cost sharing is when you have another organization or group of people or vendor, for example, who you have told all about your project, you've gotten them excited, you've gotten buy-in from them. And so they want to help support you conducting the project. And you have letters of support from these partners who will help you conduct the project. And finally, results. Are your aims realistic? For example, with $3,000, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to, feed a community of 10,000. So we want to make sure that your expectations are realistic, and that you also have criteria in mind of how you will evaluate the project. And you want to have both qualitative and quantitative assessments when you are evaluating the results of your project. So that qualitative would be, for example, the reading program I started served 50 children who all increased their grade in English by an average of half a letter grade. And qualitative assessments, sorry, that was quantitative assessments. Qualitative assessments would be having quotes or little snippets of information that attendees to your project have said about the experience and about how it affected them. And finally, how will you share the results of your project? Are you going to post on social media? Are you going to share the information in your community and hope to get other sponsors and other partner organizations? How will your results be shared? And just a few more notes on some of these criteria that we judge on. Special consideration is given to proposals that include cost sharing. As I said, we want to see that you have been out in your community gaining buy-in from other partner organizations and other individuals. They don't necessarily have to be organizations. Oftentimes, alumni living in cities where there is no recruiting office or more rural areas have the opportunity to make an even bigger impact. As I said before, also working with other YES alumni is preferred, but also working with other US government-sponsored alumni, such as Fulbright or Access alumni. That also makes your application stronger. And those who target disadvantaged groups or larger numbers of target population, that also strengthens your application as well. Just a few notes on being realistic with your project. We strongly encourage you to seek advice from your YES office on the political, social, and cultural feasibility of your project. Sometimes the projects that YES alumni want to do could cause tensions in their community, or they could actually cause trouble, for example, with local police or government officials. So do take care that you are being sensitive to the environment in which you live and intend to operate your project. Be sure you're communicative with all partners about the level of their involvement. If you find a partner organization who wants to support your project, decide upfront and very clearly about their financial and support in terms of time and resources. And be sure that you're explaining your project well and getting buy-in with these partners. You want to explain your goals of the project, not just what you are seeking from them. And again, the fourth point I've already mentioned, be sure you are aware of the political and social situation of your country. Know about laws affecting NGOs. And the second to last point, this is something you need to understand from a budget perspective. When you are creating your budget and asking for these funds, you need to be sure you understand the banking fees and also financial responsibility to your government. For example, if we send you grant money, do you need to pay taxes on that money? And if you do, you need to make sure that this is included and thought out in your budget. And finally, don't put yourself or anyone else in danger. Although you might not be affected, you need to keep in mind that there are others who are vulnerable. And this isn't always danger as in risking someone's life. This can just be damaging reputations in the community. For example, if you're working with a marginalized community who struggle to fit in, taking photos of them and posting about what you're doing could cause shame, for example, or could cause them to be further marginalized. If you are working, say, with children at an orphanage, you need to make sure that you understand all of the policies of that orphanage, or if it's a school, regarding taking photos of the children and sharing them. Just essentially need to be very sensitive as you're conducting your project about who in your community might public knowledge of their participation affect. All right, let's move on. So a few budgetary notes. Alumni grant projects do not fund computer equipment, alumni salaries, or any political activities working for or against a candidate or a party. And then there's another class of items which require strong justification. And even with strong justification, these items cannot exceed 30% of the total budget. These items are things like t-shirts, bags, banners, promotional materials, construction materials like paint or tools, or durable equipment or furniture. These items requiring a strong justification is actually a new category for those of you who have applied for an alumni grant before. This is something that has changed as of 2018. As I mentioned, these in total cannot make up more than 30% of the total budget. And the justification needs to be clearly stated. And when I say it needs to be justified, what I mean is that you need to explain how these items bring significant or immediate results to the community or the beneficiary group, or these items need to promote the YES program in a positive way. So for example, with a large-scale project with a high number of attendees, where we want to make the role of the YES program clearly visible, it might be justified in that case for organizers to have YES program printed t-shirts, just to give you one example. Also note that proposals may be funded in part. Oftentimes we review budgets as they're submitted, and we ask you to modify them or remove certain line items that you're asking to fund. Also, employees of American Councils, IRIS, AFS, Almed East, or IRN are not eligible to apply for an alumni grant. Now, you can be a team member, though. Just keep that in mind. If another alumnus is the lead on the grant, you can participate in the project if you work for one of these organizations. Also, anyone who works for the U.S. government is also ineligible to apply. So if you're an alum who works, say, for the embassy, unfortunately, you would not be able to apply. Okay. So letters of support. Letters of support are very important. As I've mentioned, a strong application will have the backing of other local organizations or other local groups or other members of your community in some way. Now, the support that they give you, it could be time, could be expertise, could be resources, it could be money, or it could be other materials. But letters of support are very important for your application because they demonstrate the buy-in that you have gotten from your community on your project. Letters of support need to be in English, just like the rest of your application. If you were unable to get a letter in English from your community member or organization, it should be translated by you. You can translate the letter and send us both copies, both the original and your translation. It should be on letterhead. If you see this is an official looking letter, it's got the letterhead at the top, all about the organization. And the letter should demonstrate that the person knows about your project. And in the letter, they should show us that they know who and what they're supporting. And your letter of support should also include what kind of support they are giving and an approximate cost of the amount. It's very important that the amount of their contribution is quantified. For example, this is actually missing in this letter that I have given you as an example here. This letter could be even stronger if in number 1, technical expertise on various subjects was waived honorarium. They should have put the estimated amount of waived honorarium. So be sure that the organizations and people that you are working with find a way to quantify all of the services that they're going to provide to you. Okay, so the application, this is what the application homepage looks like. And it's it's pretty straightforward. As I said, we prefer that you complete the application in this online system. But again, if you need to complete a Word version, that's available to you. You can see a link there to download it. Even if you're going to do even if you're going to do a Word version application, we do ask that you go into this system and at least create a username and password. And just get yourself started with an account, because that helps us later to put your paper application into the system. Within the online application, you are able to save your work and come back and do it later. You do not have to complete the entire application in one sitting. Also, we've also provided a PDF version of the application, so that if you wanted to download it and understand all of the working parts you need to do before you go into the online system and start typing in your information, you may do that as well. Okay, so moving on to one very important part of your proposal. That's your project summary. Your project summary is like a 1-minute elevator speech. You want to be able to, in one paragraph, sum up your entire project so that someone unfamiliar with it would be able to understand it. If you were speaking in the time it would take you to ride up an elevator. Your project summary should be concise and just a well-practiced description of your project. And it should be short but thorough. And I have some examples for you here. Or sorry, excuse me. We're not ready for the examples yet. So what should your summary communicate? Your summary needs to tell us who you are, your concerns, what you propose to do about them, how you will do it, your start and finish time, the activities you'll conduct and where, the costs and the cost share you have, and how much you've invested or intend to invest. And just a note on that final point, this also includes your time and energy too. We're not just talking about money when we say how much have you invested. If you are proposing a project for a women's empowerment workshop, and you have already conducted a smaller version of that workshop earlier on, be sure you tell us that. If you already have experience and you've already done work in this topic, that shows that you have already got the experience needed to further conduct successful projects in this arena. Okay, so we're going to look at two examples here of a project summary, and then we're going to take a little poll from our audience afterward to find out which example you think is better. Okay, so I'm going to read this to you just so it's not silence while everyone else reads. So this is example 1. The Kids Summer Camp Project is an activity that will be held on the weekend from Friday afternoon until noon Sunday. It will give more than 120 poor kids the opportunity to play games, learn things, and be taught some morals and manners. However, the main focus of the weekend will be on cooperation. These students have heard much from their parents and immediate communities about people who are different from them, but they have never interacted with them. They will build a foundation of cooperation and acceptance towards those who are different from them during the weekend. The Red Cross will be providing assistance and participating in the camp itself. This project will also involve YES alumni who will work and interact with other youths to share experiences. So that's your example 1. Let's look at example 2. I will lead a group of YES alumni to design and develop a 3-day children's summer camp for 120 children ages 6 to 12. I have experience working with children as a volunteer in my old elementary school as a tutor. The targeted participants are children from underprivileged neighborhoods around the capital city of my country, some of whom are homeless and some who have had to drop out of school. They have few opportunities to learn while having fun, and they generally do not have interaction with children who are from different religions or ethnic backgrounds. The camp would be an opportunity to play while learning, using games and activities that develop confidence, communication skills, and knowledge of others who are different from them. I have developed a detailed curriculum, see attached, based on my experience and with the help of the International Committee of the Red Cross, who will partner with us on this project by providing materials and offering experienced resources for the camp. The budget requested is $1,980, and the ICRC will provide $200 in-kind donations. So let's open the poll to our participants. Which example is better? And our Facebook Live community, feel free to post on Facebook what your thoughts are on which summary is better. And one more request, I'd like to call on our participants to tell us why the summary they chose is better. So if you're watching on, you're watching the webinar here on Zoom, you can type into the chat box, or if you're on Facebook, you can use the comments. All right, so I'm going to ask my colleagues to let us know. Do we have answers here? Awesome, thanks. So Leah, which project are you talking about? Or sorry, which example are you talking about? Great. So Leah says number 2 is better because it's more elaborate and you have all the information you need about the project and the language is simple. Nice answer. Great job. Awesome. Thanks, Leah. Yes, that's correct. Example 2 has better detail. It includes budget information. Although it's just one line, it includes the budget information. It discusses results. It explains the constituency. It clearly tells us the objectives of the camp. And it leaves out any derogatory language. I don't remember, if you remember from the first example, it talks about poor children who it's going to teach some morals to. We definitely want to use language that is uplifting and empowering to the constituency that you're trying to reach. Great job. Thanks, everyone. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about budgeting. You are going to be asked to do a budget for your application, and there is an example of a budget within the application, but I want to just talk a little bit here about your budget. First of all, before we move on to the contents of this slide, I just want to stress to everyone that when you're creating your budget, it's very important that you do your homework ahead of time. If for part of your budget, you know that you're going to need to, say, buy some school supplies for a project that you're holding at a school for underprivileged children, please make sure that you're going out to a store before you write your budget and you're actually pricing these items. So what we see oftentimes is, an alum will submit a budget, have their application approved, they start their project, and then they realize that something they expected to cost $50 is actually costing $100. And your budget needs to be fully finalized when we approve it, which means it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to give you any more money. So the budget, as it's approved, is generally the end point. So be sure you're really doing your homework on how much everything you're asking for is going to cost, and make sure you're thinking of any miscellaneous costs. For example, I know sometimes project teams realize that they're spending a lot of money on phone calls to each other to organize the project, and they didn't think of that beforehand. They didn't think to include some phone credit in their project budget. So just be sure you're thinking in detail about all the things that it's going to take to successfully pull off this project. And be sure that when you're creating your budget, you're including an item narrative, which means an explanation. So in this example, we have a bus cost for taking participants from city A to city B. If the cost is $50 per hour and it'll be 4 hours round trip, and the bus company has agreed to provide 1 hour for free, then you want to make sure that in your budget line item, you are explaining it like the top example and not the bottom, okay? So on the bottom, you do not want to just say bus on the line and give them the monetary amounts. You want to make sure you include an explanation of exactly what's happening and the cost share that's being provided. Okay, we've already talked about cost share just a little bit, but I just want to give some further examples and explanations of what cost share is. In-kind donations and cost share are the things that organizations and individuals provide toward your project. This can be equipment or furniture. It could be a space. So for like if a organization is letting you use a room for free, that is cost share, and you should make sure that in your budget you are quantifying the amount and estimating what it would cost if you had to pay them for that space, because showing that you have these free resources makes your application stronger, because you are showing that community members have buy-in to your project. Cost share can also be in terms of people. This can be staffing, professionals, experts who are willing to help out with your workshop, and also services such as construction. If an organization is allowing you to print at their company for free, these are all things that contribute to the value of your project and should be shown in your budget. But not only in your budget, you should have letters of support for your cost share and in-kind donation sources. All right, let's move on. So how are grants evaluated? There are multiple rounds of evaluations, both in your country and in the US. And these are done by the recruiting organization partners and American councils. In total, the applications go through 3 rounds of evaluation. And I've mentioned this already, but the final selection often takes time, and we often have follow-up for you. So this is what I mentioned before about July and August, and how a lot of times that is time, if your grant is chosen for funding, that time is generally spent revising your proposal just a little bit. Oftentimes we want further explanation about something in your proposal, or we are saying, you know, here you have said that this organization is going to provide you with a gymnasium for free for 5 events. You really need to go back to that organization and get a letter of support. Or we oftentimes have budget adjustment requests that you need to make. And this is all done with the American Council's YES team. So you would be communicating with me essentially directly to get your proposals and budgets revised. Okay, funds transfer. Once you have fully revised your proposal, and you have sent us your acceptance letter that you sign off saying, I accept this grant and responsibility for these funds, then approximately 1 month before your project start date, we transfer the funds to you. And as I mentioned before, and as is on the bottom of this slide, we send you the first 80% of your funds in the initial transfer. And then once you accounted for the spending of all 80% of your funds, then the remaining 20% is sent to you. Within your acceptance letter, we ask you for bank account information, but please note, except in very special circumstances, funds are almost always wired to the local YES office, and then your local YES office disperses the money to you. So be sure that when you're completing your acceptance documents that you are in touch with the local office and that you get their bank account information. Unless you have prior permission from the local office, then the money can't be sent to you. So if you send me the acceptance letter with your bank account information, I'm going to immediately follow up with your organization, whether that's Ahmed East or AFS or IRN, to check in with them and find out if you have the special permission to have the money sent straight to you. And if you do, you must confirm with the bank that you have a US dollars account. Otherwise, the money can be rejected and sent back to us. And when that happens, oftentimes projects get delayed, and so it's not good. Okay, so now it's question time. And also here is my email address if you have any questions about grants, anytime between now and the application deadline or even after. You can reach me here. Again, my name is Jenny St. John. I manage the YES Alumni email account, and you can ask me questions about grants at any time. All right, so I'm gonna ask my colleagues at the IRN team if they can help us with some of the questions. Okay, so we have one question that says, how can I create a budget without knowing cost of expenses? Well, that's why I say you have to do your homework, because you do have to know the cost of expenses. You do have to think very clearly about what it is you're trying to do and what you will need to do it. And then you need to go out there in your community and find out how much these things will cost. Obviously this will take some estimating, but you have to put in, your best estimates on what something's going to cost. So Leah asks that I said we usually fund about 20 projects. Does that include individual projects too? Yes, that does. It's a mix of generally around 20 individual and group projects total. And 20 isn't a set number. We fund as many projects as we have the money to fund, which it usually works out to being about 20. Someone has asked, can we access this presentation later? Absolutely. We are going to post this presentation on our YES Programs YouTube channel, and we will be putting a link to that on the YES Programs website under Alumni Resources. So Leah asks, is it possible that someone applies for an individual grant and is invited to be part of a group? That is a very good question, Leah. As a matter of fact, alumni can be part of more than one grant project, as long as they're not the organizer of more than one grant project. This happens frequently in very tight alumni communities that, maybe we have 3 alumni who like to work closely together and they each apply for a different grant project, where on the project they apply for, they are the lead grantee, and then the other alumni are on their team, and that's perfectly fine. You can win a grant where you are the grantee and you are the one responsible for all the accounting and reporting, and you can also at the same time be on a team of another grant project helping out and supporting the person who's won another grant. Absolutely. Does that answer your question? All right, do we have any other questions? Okay, guys, well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. I've had so much fun getting a chance to collect live with the alumni community. If you have any other questions, again, you can email me at yesalumni@americancouncils.org, and this webinar will be posted to the website so you can watch it again if you need to refer back to it. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.